this conference from regions affected by nuclear use, manufacturing and testing, including my own country, Kazakhstan, which suffered more than 450 tests in over 4 decades. Assistance and remediation is a topic that holds profound importance to the hearts of many people in Kazakhstan, the Pacific and other regions. It is my hope that state parties can collectively agree on potential practical measures and ways to advance victims' assistance and environmental remediation efforts, including in the idea of establishment of international trust fund. I extend my sincere appreciations to the co-chairs of the working groups, the focal point and the facilitator for their dedicated efforts in implementing and universalizing the treaty during the intersessional period. At the same time, the role of civil society and non-governmental organizations has been invaluable in mobilizing public support, raising awareness, and reinforcing the global disarmament norms. Two key organizations that have played a pivotal role in promoting the TPNW and advocating for the abolition of nuclear weapons are the International Committee of the Red Cross and the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Both these organizations remain vital in ensuring the treaty's success by fostering political will, educating the public, and advocating for nuclear abolition. Distinguished participants, as we convene today, we bear a collective responsibility to move beyond rhetoric and into meaningful action. This meeting is not just a reaffirmation of commitments, but a critical opportunity to set in motion policies that will ensure nuclear disarmament becomes an irreversible process. We must not only reaffirm our dedication, but actively pursue measures that will lead to the complete abolition of nuclear weapons. Our discussions must yield tangible progress, reinforcing international norms against nuclear weapons and ensuring their permanent elimination. Let us reaffirm our unwavering resolve to eliminate this existential threat and translate our commitments into concrete action. I wish us all productive work ahead. I thank you for your attention. Dear colleagues, the meeting will now consider item 2 of the provisional agenda entitled Election of Officers. According to Rule 6, Paragraph 1 of the Rules of Procedure, this meeting should elect 3 vice presidents. On 24th December, the Secretariat sent a note verbal to states parties soliciting candidatures for the position of vice presidents. I am informed by the Secretariat that the following candidature have been received: Austria, Cambodia, and Kiribati. As the number of candidates does not exceed the number of available positions, may I take it that meeting decides to dispense with the secret ballot for this election? I see no objection. It is so decided. We will now proceed to the election. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to elect Austria, Cambodia, and Kiribati as vice presidents of the 3rd meeting of state parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons? I see no objections. It is so decided. I congratulate vice presidents on their elections. The meeting has thus concluded this stage of its consideration of agenda item 2. I now invite delegations to turn to item 3 of the provisional agenda entitled Adoption of the Agenda. Consultations on the draft provisional agenda were held on 20th November 2024. The provisional agenda has been issued as document TPNW/MSP/2025/1. This document, as well as all other documents of these official documents of this meeting of state parties, is available on the website of the meeting. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to adopt the provisional agenda as contained in document TPNW MSP 2025/1. I see no objection. It is so decided. May I take it that the wish of the meeting to conclude its consideration of agenda item 3? I see no objection. It is so decided. I now invite delegations to turn to agenda item 4, entitled Confirmation of the Secretary General of the meeting. In accordance with Rule 13, Paragraph 1 of the Rules of Procedure, I wrote to the Secretary General of the United Nations to request him to designate an official to act as Secretary General of the meeting of the state parties. I am in respect of a letter from the Under-Secretary General and High Representative of Disarmament Affairs dated 13th of January 2025, in which she informed me that she has, on behalf of the Secretary General, designated Mr. Christopher King, Chief of the Weapons of Mass Destruction Branch of the Office for Disarmament Affairs, to serve in the capacity of the Secretary General of TPNW, 3MSP. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to take note of the designation of Mr. Christopher King as Secretary General of this meeting? I see no objection. It is so decided. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to conclude its consideration of Agenda Item 4? I see no objection. It is so decided. The meeting will now consider Agenda Item 5, entitled Decisions Adopted in the Period Between Meetings of State Parties, in accordance with Rule 45. Rule 45 of the Rules of Procedure concerns decision-making in the period between meetings of the state parties. Paragraph 2 of that rule reads as follows, I quote, "The meeting of state parties shall take note of the decisions adopted through the procedure referred to in paragraph 1 of this rule and at its first meeting held after its adoption. The decisions shall be reflected in the report of the meetings at which the decisions are taken note of." End of quote. The decision taken since the second meeting of the state parties under the procedure in Rule 45, paragraph 1, are contained in document TPNW MSP 2025/CRP1. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to take note of this decision and to annex them to the report of this meeting? I see no objection. It is so decided. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to conclude its consideration of Agenda Item 5? I see no objection. It is so decided. Dear colleagues, let us now turn to Agenda Item 6, entitled Organization of Work. Delegations have before them an indicative timetable circulated as document TPNW MSP 2025-INF/3. I would like to stress that this is only an indicative timetable and would appeal for the flexibility of delegations to make best use of time available to us. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to take note of the indicative timetable as contained in document TPNW MSP 2025-INF/3? I see no objection. It is so decided. I should also like to draw the attention of delegations to a summarized version of the indicative timetable, which has been prepared for their reference and is available as document TPNW/MSP 2025/INF/4. The meeting has thus concluded this stage of its consideration of Agenda Item 6. I now invite you to turn to Sub-Item A, entitled Appointment of Members of the Credentials Committee of Agenda Item 7, entitled Credentials of Representatives to the Meeting. Rule 4 of the Rules of Procedure of this meeting reads as follows, I quote, "A Credentials Committee of 5 members shall be appointed at the beginning of the meeting of state parties on the proposal of the President. It shall examine the credentials of representatives and report to the meeting of state parties without delay." End of quote. In accordance with Rule 4, I propose that the following states parties be appointed as members of the Credential Committee: Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, Cape Verde, Ireland, Lao People's Democratic Republic. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to appoint Antigua, Barbuda, Belize, Cape Verde, Ireland, Lao People's Democratic Republic? I see no objection. It is so decided. I should like to inform the newly appointed members of the Credentials Committee that the committee's first meeting will take place at 2:30 p.m. this afternoon in room 30 mm2. I think it's Secretariat building. Yeah. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to conclude its consideration of sub-item A of agenda item 7? I see no objection. It is so decided. The meeting will now consider agenda item 12, entitled Financial Matters. Delegations have before them the financial report, issued as document TPNW MSP 2025/9. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to take note of the financial report? I see no objections. It is so decided. I appeal to all state parties and observer states that have not yet done so to pay their assessed contribution in full as soon as possible. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to conclude its consideration of agenda items 12? I see no objection. It is so decided. The meeting will now consider agenda item 8, entitled High-Level Opening Session, address by the Secretary General of the United Nations and address by high-level officials. It is my pleasure now to give the floor to Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, Under Secretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, who will make a statement on behalf of the Secretary General of the United Nations. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. It is an honor for me to represent the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, at the third meeting of states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. I congratulate you, Mr. President, and the Vice Presidents on your elections. You have the full support of myself and of this Office for Disarmament Affairs for your work. Mr. President, when I spoke at the second meeting of states parties a little over a year ago, I quoted the Secretary General in saying that our world is becoming unhinged. Geopolitical tensions are rising. Global challenges are mounting. And as you yourselves then reaffirmed in the political declaration, and I quote, the continued existence of nuclear weapons and lack of meaningful progress on disarmament heightened the risk of nuclear catastrophe and pose an existential threat to humanity as a whole, end of quote. Sadly, these trends have continued and only intensified. Geopolitical tensions remain unresolved and are also dramatically evolving. Dangerous nuclear rhetoric and threats have not abated, and I am concerned that the unpredictable situations may exacerbate the public fear, leading to increased belief in the false narrative of nuclear weapons being the ultimate provider of security. Critical disarmament instruments are being eroded, and, unsurprisingly, this is contributing to a growing sense amongst non-nuclear weapon states, particularly in the South, that there is far little action on the part of those states that possess nuclear weapons. Yet, even in this challenging moment, there are reasons for hope, especially in relation to the full implementation of the TPNW. First, the global recognition of the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons continue to grow. The awarding of last year's Nobel Peace Prize to Nihon Hidankyo, whose delegates are present here today, is a case in point. Their decades of tireless advocacy have brought attention to the inhumane suffering caused by nuclear weapons. I take this opportunity to congratulate them once again on this well-deserved recognition and to reaffirm Secretary General Guterres' pledge that the legacy of the hibakusha will be ensured. Second, the membership of this treaty continues to grow, with 4 additional states, Indonesia, Sao Tome and Principe, Sierra Leone and Solomon Islands, having ratified the treaty since our last meeting. Joining the TPNW sends an important signal to the international community, and I welcome the decision in this regard by these states. Third, there is the continuing broad cross-spectrum engagement with the treaty. By way of example, we have the presence of a good number of signatory and observer states in this meeting. We also continue to see active investment by civil society with organizations such as the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN, and other committed NGOs raising awareness, advocating for disarmament, and supporting the treaty's implementation, including through amplifying the voices of affected communities and providing capacity building on how to join the TPNW. Fourth and finally, the Scientific Advisory Group continues to play a crucial role in supporting the treaty with rigorous, evidence-based research. I welcome the recent establishment of the TPNW Scientific Network, which has already held its first meeting and which will foster collaboration amongst experts from across scientific disciplines, reinforcing the treaty's credibility and implementation. Mr. President, the second meeting of states parties facilitated important advances in the TPNW's implementation, not least the expansion of the mandates of the intersessional process and the strengthening of the Vienna Action Plan. However, I believe this meeting has a special obligation. As the last meeting of states parties before the TPNW's first review conference, it needs to lay the ground for success at what should be a milestone occasion. It should systematically map out what needs to be achieved between now and then. The review conference, of course, would not be merely a stock-taking exercise of progress made, but will set the strategic direction for the treaty's future. In taking decisions this week, you should be guided by what it is you want the first review conference to achieve. And in such volatile times, I believe ambitious outcomes are not only preferable, but necessary for maintaining momentum. The alternative is the inertia that is born of cynicism. And there is a momentum to be maintained. The growing nuclear dangers have been a wake-up call for the vast majority of the world's citizens, that the threat of nuclear weapons did not end with the Cold War. Last year's Pact for the Future is a case in point, with its recommitment to the goal of the total elimination of nuclear weapons and its recognition of the devastation nuclear war would visit upon all humankind. I certainly hope, therefore, that you are able to agree on a political declaration that builds upon the language of the pact, one that continues to place the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons at the center and underscores the inherent dangers posed by the existence of these inhumane weapons. I hope it is a declaration that prioritizes victims' assistance and environmental remediation and demands that nuclear weapon states live up to the disarmament obligations and commitments they have undertaken. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this will be a busy week. It will set a stage for the review conference and the next phase of the treaty's existence. As we embark on our discussions, let us remain steadfast in our shared goal to consign nuclear weapons to history. I wish you productive discussions and meaningful progress in your deliberations. I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank you very much, Madam Undersecretary and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, for your statement. Dear colleagues, in accordance with the practice of the previous meetings of state parties, I will now give the floor to the representative of the International Committee of the Red Cross to take a statement on behalf of the President, to be followed by the Executive Director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, and then Mr. Jiro Hamasumi of Nihon Hidanko, and Ms. Tarim Taukaro to speak on behalf of affected communities. In addition, if I see no objection, I would also give the floor to the Secretary General of the Agency for Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean. May I take it that it is the wish of the meeting to proceed accordingly? I see no objection. It is so decided. Dear colleagues, I now give the floor to Ms. Laetitia Maria Isabel Courtois, Permanent Observer of the International Committee of the Red Cross to the United Nations, to make a statement on behalf of the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross. You have the floor.
Mr. President, thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to represent the International Committee of the Red Cross at this third meeting of states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, alongside representatives of organizations and communities that have fought hard to outlaw these catastrophic and inhumane weapons. I deliver this statement today on behalf of the President of the ICRC. Today, almost half of the world's states have expressed their will to be bound by the TPNW. This is a groundbreaking achievement, a victory for multilateralism and a resounding call to make humanity the center of all debates and decision-making on nuclear disarmament. Let me highlight why the TPNW is so important. First, it fills a legal gap by comprehensively prohibiting nuclear weapons. The entire Red Cross and Red Crescent movement have been advocating for prohibition since witnessing the horrific impact of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Prohibition fully aligns with the rules and principles of international humanitarian law upon which the treaty is premised. Second, it advances nuclear disarmament. The prohibition of nuclear weapons is an indispensable step toward their elimination and an effective measure in line with Article 6 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Third, it seeks to mitigate the harm caused by past nuclear weapons use and testing on people and on the environment by establishing robust obligations regarding victim assistance and environmental remediation. Ultimately, the TPNW makes a real contribution to peace efforts. How can there be lasting peace in a world where nuclear weapons still exist? Mr. President, current geopolitical tensions, the ongoing modernization of nuclear arsenals, technological developments, changes in nuclear doctrines, and unbridled rhetoric all have alarmingly increased the risk of deliberate or accidental use of nuclear weapons. History and science show that any use would have catastrophic humanitarian consequences to which no state or international organization can respond. Threatening to use nuclear weapons through statements or other actions has become commonplace. Nuclear threats raise serious concerns from a humanitarian, legal, and ethical perspective. They increase the probability of use and risk normalizing it in political discourse and public opinion, thus eroding the long-established taboo. Nuclear threats are unequivocally prohibited under the TPNW and are inconsistent with the object and purpose of the NPT. By implying the possibility of using nuclear weapons, threats are abhorrent to the principles of humanity and the dictates of public conscience. I call on all states to consistently condemn nuclear threats, to lower the risk of escalation, and strengthen the nuclear taboo. I cannot stress it enough, Mr. President. Universalizing the TPNW is critical. I congratulate Indonesia, Sao Tome and Principe, Sierra Leone, and Solomon Islands on becoming contracting parties last year. Lastly, Mr. President, let me underscore the importance of ensuring the full and effective implementation of the treaty. As outlined in more detail in the ICRC's working paper, I call on states parties, 1, to reiterate deep concern for the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of any use of nuclear weapons, reaffirm the incompatibility of IHL, and condemn any threat of use of nuclear weapons by anyone. 2, to continue and advocate work toward the establishment of an international trust fund for victim assistance and environmental remediation. 3, to agree on concrete actions to highlight the security concerns posed by the continued existence of nuclear weapons based on the outcome of the consultative process. And 4, to explore, develop, and promote complementarity and synergies with the NPT and WFC treaties, together with all states parties to those treaties. The complete elimination of nuclear weapons is an unwavering priority for the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. We will continue to work tirelessly until a world free from nuclear weapons becomes a reality. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the permanent observer of the International Committee of the Red Cross to the United Nations for her statement on behalf of the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross. I give now the floor to Ms. Melissa Park, Executive Director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons.
Mr. President, Excellencies, friends. 8 decades ago, 2 nuclear weapons, considered small by today's standards, obliterated the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. More than 250,000 people perished, the vast majority of them Japanese and Korean, including some 38,000 children. Others, like Jiro Hamasumi from Nihon Hidankyo, who is speaking today, managed to survive and have dedicated their lives to warning humanity of the nuclear peril. I thank him and all other hibakusha for their courageous, unstinting advocacy and congratulate them once again on their Nobel Peace Prize. The hibakusha have always been clear in their demand for abolition, not just arms control and non-proliferation, but the total elimination of nuclear weapons worldwide. Anything less is inadequate, given the gravity of the threat these devices pose to all life on our planet. With few exceptions, these hibakusha who are alive today were children in 1945. Through their young eyes, they witnessed unimaginable horror. Last October, I was struck by the words of Toshiyuki Mimaki, a co-chair of Nihon Hidankyo, who survived the Hiroshima bombing as a 3-year-old boy. Responding to the Nobel announcement, he said that his foremost wish was to please abolish nuclear weapons while we, the hibakusha, are alive. Next week, he will turn 83. Why can his vision not be realised? Too many people have become resigned to the view that nuclear weapons are a permanent fixture in our world. We must never accept that idea. Nuclear weapons were built with human hands and they can be dismantled with human hands. This is not a utopian dream. The fact that large geographic regions have been declared free of such weapons suggests that one day the entire world can be. As states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, you are leading us in that direction. You have each rejected nuclear weapons, completely and forever, for yourselves and for all. It is especially significant that the country presiding over this meeting, Kazakhstan, once had more than 1,400 nuclear weapons on its territory. It relinquished them all. South Africa, another prominent supporter of the TPNW, has also shown that disarmament is possible by dismantling its arsenal of apartheid-era nuclear bombs. There are no technical barriers to eliminating nuclear weapons, only political ones. With leadership and resolve, progress could be achieved very rapidly. In challenging times like these, we might be inclined to lower our expectations, to temper our demands. But the higher the stakes, the more ambitious we must be. Indeed, historically, some of the greatest breakthroughs in the field of